But what I will say, amidst everything you touched on, the collapse, again, Miami is rolling. They've been rolling the entire playoffs. So one, it showed that it wasn't a fluke. And two, it really is, a big congrats and a big ups to Miami because they just peaked at the right time. And what they're doing with their roster as currently constructed and who's available
No
is
Tyler Hero, no
is just
Oladipo.
it's just ridiculous. It just goes to show one. I mean, Spo is a great coach.
Yeah.
I'll come back to Spo when we talk about coaches, but that's something that definitely has to be touched on. He's been coaching amazing throughout the entire playoffs and really throughout his entire career. But that's been a huge factor. Like Spo has outcoached every coach that he's faced in the playoffs so far.
Yeah.
But this was probably needed
Yeah.
for the Bucks. Any Bucks fan will tell you that Bud probably should have been gone. And I don't think that Bud is the worst coach out there, but his philosophy, I just think doesn't fit the roster. Like offensively, sure, but defensively, I think we've been getting by because we have great defensive players. But we also don't have those players that are willing to kind of go against the status quo. We have players that are going to buy into the coaching staff, and not that that's not supposed to be the case. But I feel like there were moments where players could have took more of a lead or more control of what the team was doing, especially when you have a Giannis, especially when you have a Drew, and we're talking about one of the top 5 players in the league, and we're talking about one of the top defensive players in the league. Throw Brook in there as well, but just more voices that I feel like could have been heard from a player standpoint. But this needed to happen. Now it puts the Bucks in a peculiar situation because we have to find a coach. I've been saying since jump that that's the first step. The coach really will dictate how the rest of this goes. But we have to figure out the roster. I don't think Giannis is anywhere near jumping ship. I don't think we've reached that point. But I do think that this year is the most pivotal year in that decision for him. I do think this is the year that we make a decision on Chris Middleton, or he makes a decision for himself. I've always been of the thought since last year. I don't know if I'm not sure what exactly it is, but I don't know if Chris wants to. I don't know if he wants to be in the role that he's in, which may sound crazy to a lot of people, but I truly think that he wants to be in a different situation where maybe not the main guy. I don't know if he sees himself as that, but he just didn't really seem super invested this year. And granted, you can talk about the injuries and him not having a lot of time on the court with the guys, but it just doesn't. I wouldn't want to run it back necessarily with the exact same roster because I still think there are glaring holes there. And maybe not to the starting unit. Like if you keep the starting unit, cool, but we definitely need to retool the bench. Or just utilize players that we have on the bench. I agree. I don't understand the no Jay Crowder minutes, the limited Javon Carter minutes when he's been solid all season and brought in Crowder for a playoff run. So
we traded 5 second rounders for what? So I think I wouldn't say I necessarily completely run it back. I think there's a good amount of auxiliary pieces that we need to succeed.
Yeah.
I think we see what it looks like with a new coach first before we completely scrap the idea, because we've seen that we can get a ring. We've seen that we can do a deep playoff push. It's just that each and every year that we've had these glaring errors, what can we point it back to?
So this is why I don't agree. Because let's look at the last 3 years. So if we start back at the championship year, right? Go back to 2021. So I thought we had I don't know if we had so much glaring issues there. I just genuinely didn't think we were going to get past Brooklyn. And more than likely, if they're healthy, it doesn't happen. But as with every year, luck goes in somebody's favor. So we get past Brooklyn, right? We end up getting Atlanta instead of Philly. And I don't know if Philly would have beat us that year. You know what I'm saying? But even Trey was giving us problems. But, overall, we get through Atlanta. Phoenix, I think we looked our best against Phoenix. Through the entire playoffs, we when we got to the big stage, everybody stepped up and did what they needed to do. Giannis cemented himself there, and everybody played their role. And I think that's a great moment for the team. And I think I felt really good about last year because I felt like they really rode that momentum. And I still genuinely think that with a healthy Chris Middleton, I think we at least get back. I don't want to commit to saying that we would have went back to back, but I think we get back to the finals because even though that Miami team last year, I don't know about better, but on paper and roster wise, they were better last year and they were the one seed. I think we still could have beat them. The same way we went 7 games with Boston without Middleton, I think that series easily would have went 7, but I think we could have came out of it. But that, Middleton goes down. Okay. Coming back this year, I thought we did all the things to retool. And I thought that Crowder was going to be kind of that piece that he's not PJ, but he serves in that role or in that capacity. So I thought that, okay, like we're good. But the more you kind of watch, the more you realize that Giannis can't, I don't know, as the league gets better and as more time goes on and more teams learn how to scheme against Giannis, if he does not develop a different way to score and be effective, and I'm not trying to take away from progress that we've seen him make over the last 5 years, right? But to see him in this series against Miami just kind of go back to how it looked like in 2019 was really discouraging in a way, because it's like, why is that what we revert to when our backs are against the wall? Why is his mentality when we're losing, now I have to revert from everything that I've grown in the last 5 years? And I say that to say, and come back to the Middleton point, I think we have to find another guy to pair with Giannis. Like, it has to happen. Giannis is in year 11. He's in the middle of his prime. The reason I don't think we have this year to try it out is because it's already going to be relatively rocky with the new coach. And rocky doesn't mean bad. There's just going to be an adjustment period.
Yeah.
If that adjustment period is, okay, we take a new roster, maybe bring in another guy, see how that works. And yeah, we aren't thinking championship or bust, but if that feeling starts to come and Giannis gets more comfortable, or that chemistry comes together, whoever that guy is, then I feel better about him finishing his contract. But if we try to run it back with minor changes to the roster and nothing changes, essentially, because the regular season doesn't matter at this point. You can perform how
regular season doesn't at all.
You can seed wherever, but are you going to be ready, and are players going to be able to perform in the playoffs? Do we trust, our guys to perform in the playoffs? And I just don't think the way the roster is currently constructed, I don't think those guys have really proven it in the last 2 years. When we've needed our role guys to step up, they just haven't. So I think getting the right coach, and I'm not saying there has to be super blowing it up, but we need to figure out what is the best, who are the best players to put around Giannis. But I would also really consider getting another guy. And when I say that, in my mind, another guy is a Dame or a Beal. There needs to be another scorer who can go get their own bucket, because Giannis is not at a place where he can get his own bucket at any given time in any given situation.
But what I'm wondering is where, to add on to that, where did last year's back to the basket game go for Giannis? I didn't see us work out of him in the paint almost ever. I don't know why, for what reason. I couldn't tell you.
He's getting doubled much more. And not that he doesn't know how to play out of the double, but I think that I would imagine that maybe they just didn't commit to being forced, for him to double every single play. Because if he goes back to the basket, that's exactly what's going to happen. And yeah, you kind of limit being able to wall him up, but again, because you have Middleton is the next guy who can go get his own bucket. But even Middleton has certain inconsistencies where that's not something you can count on, which means there are games where you can say, I'll live with Middleton. And that can't be the case. Giannis can't have a guy. He needs to have another guy who you can't live with whatever the outcome will be.
I don't know. I feel like that, like you said earlier, I think it's just a bit of a small sample size this year to say that like he wasn't or he can't be. Because like we've seen cases where he has been and can be the guy. I think that's just like recency bias that we're falling into.
Giannis or Middleton?
Middleton. I think that's recency bias on a bit of an off year where he's injured for a good way through. And we get to the first round, and it's not like he played abysmal. He had maybe, I think, a bad game, but I think all of the rest of them where he finished that last game with 32, and I can't tell you the rest of the stat line, but it's not like he's not doing his part. I'd say that like we're looking at terms of like someone that's fully on the court and consistency wise, like even though Drew Holiday backs it up on the defensive end, he has more off games offensively than I think any one of our starters. Like, and Brooke, maybe just by the case of him not having to get like that many touches. But I'd say that like if we're looking at somebody that has a lot of on-off nights, even though he was an all-star this year, I'd say Drew's maybe more that guy in terms of like someone that's healthy that hasn't been able to put it all together on the team. Whereas Chris, I feel like has showcased that he can be that guy at times, just that the injury bug keeps getting him from time to time.
So if you had to pick one player, are you taking Middleton over Drew if the Bucks had to choose?
I think if there's a player that's going to get more, and if he is going to get a guy back, Drew's probably going to be that. I don't think any team is going to want damaged goods that is seen as like the Robin on the team anyway. So I'd say that if we are going to get what we want to get out of that trade, it's probably going to have to be Drew anyways. Because I don't think that Chris moves the needle that much to get either one, even a Beal in that. If this is what if this is what his value is looking like, if he's a aging 30-year-old that is getting hurt more so than playing, Drew is going to get you that piece more than Chris would. We'd have to give up more with Chris than we would have Drew. And that's someone that wants to see a pairing of like Drew, Dame, Giannis. That's the dream scenario, but is it a pipe dream?
I only don't think it's a pipe dream because it would depend on the situation in Portland. It depends on how, like, if Dame wanted to get to Milwaukee, Portland might have leverage. But honestly, if Dame wants to get to Milwaukee, they're kind of gonna have to settle. We've
seen trades this year where it's like they settle. We've seen that. That's not new.
It will be easier to move Drew just because his contract isn't as big as Middleton's, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, honestly, I don't know. My thing with Middleton is I think that even in his moments where I think that he had a great year. And I think that even in the year that he got injured, he looked good, but a lot of that was still going to ride Giannis. And I'm not saying this is the best way I can explain it. Giannis would need his version of a Kobe. And if Giannis is Shaq. Because you may not argue that arguing who's better is nuance. Like that's not really important. But Shaq was Shaq. He was dominant. And in moments he did for himself. But a lot of that also came from Kobe developing into Kobe. And also Kobe could go do while Shaq could chill. You know what I'm saying? Giannis is never afforded the opportunity to chill. And granted, he doesn't want to, and he doesn't have to, and that's great. But imagine how much more we could get from Giannis if he could take 3 or 4 minutes, like in a game, and just let somebody else cook and know that they'll be good. Know that they can still go and either get or create 10 to 12 points on their own without him even really having to do much. Him just being out there as a decoy or just as somebody who the team has to watch out for.
But didn't that happen in that Heat series with Giannis on the court? Like with Giannis out there, there was nothing getting put up.
My point, but that's because even with Middleton having 32, he shot terribly. Like most of the players shot terribly from the field. So like if you have a player who, there's a lot of players I'm going to count on more than I am Middleton. And that's not to say that he's some terrible player. Like I still feel like he's a really great wing. If I have to put him in a tier, B tier, I mean, depending on who else you're throwing in the conversation, but there are other guys, and if you put another guy with Giannis in Chris's place, we're having different conversations, I feel like. So I just feel like that's what the Bucks ultimately have to decide. But if I'm the Bucks, essentially all I'm saying is if I'm the Bucks, I would not bank on having the rest of Giannis's contract guaranteed as a time frame to figure it out.
I personally am on the side that we get a coach, we see what it looks like, we move from there. Because I feel like these last few seasons, that's my main takeaway. I don't see it as a roster deficiency. I see it as a coaching issue where we're not playing who's on our roster. I mean, we got Beauchamp rotting for what? He's probably one of the more talented guys on our bench that gets no run. We have Jay Crowder that sat there, did nothing. When we're saying, oh, yeah, Chris is a liability on defense, okay, well, then play somebody that will not be a liability on defense. There's just too many guys that we have on our team that we've shown that we can succeed, or they've shown positive minutes. If there's somebody that's young and up and coming that deserves a chance, I think Marjan's one of those guys, but Bud has him in the doghouse for what? Like, I don't see why someone like Grayson's out there for that long getting cooked by every which guard that the Heat have when we have good young talent that we draft that we decide not to do anything with. Like our last good draft pick was Giannis. Everyone else has been in and out the door.
That's a lie. Because
Dante is maybe the only productive draft pick that we've had.
Another lie. We let Brogdon go to pay Middleton, which I will always look at as
to pay Eric Bledsoe. To pay Eric Bledsoe.
No, that is not why
that is it, the debate was, do we keep Drew or do we keep Eric or do we keep Brogdon? We already paid
Middleton that year.
But the reason why we couldn't pay Brogdon is because we paid Eric Bledsoe that mid-season $100 million. So then we were locked up. We made our decision then.
Sure, but we also didn't have to give Middleton 5 years, $180 million. He could have taken less to keep us a playmaker.
But we were never going to keep Brogdon after that Bledsoe deal, because that we paid a dude that's in Shanghai $100 million for what?
And Bledsoe left. That trade happened in 21
for the Drew trade.
Yeah, after the bubble. I guess, man, but
Brogdon and DiVincenzo are only two, but that's a second rounder, and then that's
both first rounders. I thought Brogdon was first rounder.
Brogdon was the only rookie of the year from the second round, other than I forgot who.
Yeah, but Brogdon, DiVincenzo, and
then who?
But when you have, with the way the team was going, by the time we got to 2019 in Toronto, by the time we got there, I think Brogdon was gone by that time. But DiVincenzo, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was there, or maybe his rookie year was what ended up being the bubble year.
The bubble, yeah.
I'm not sure, but nonetheless, we can chalk it up to coaching, and that's a huge part of it. But I also think that because we won the championship in 21, that a lot of Bucks fans use that year, and it's like a lot of Bucks fans use that year, and they'll say oh, well, the roster isn't that bad, and we forget that the year before, we collapsed in 19, right? And yes, that was an amazing run by Kawhi, but a collapse on the Bucks in that part. And everybody's like, well, Giannis got to figure it out. He'll get better, do. Okay,
Yep.
cool. We come back to bubble year. Whatever happened when they went to the bubble, fumbled again, right?
Yep.
So 21, again, I will take away nothing from that run by Giannis and from guys stepping it up and from the chemistry that was built that year. But a lot of that had to do with luck. A lot of it had to do with a lot of luck that year. So we
Yeah.
get to the finals, we win. Okay, cool. But like I said, that Phoenix series, like we looked the best that series and we were the better team. We come back, it's a whole bunch of shoulda, coulda, wouldas, and what ifs because Middleton goes down. And then we get here, and it's like, okay, we can talk about didn't have the chemistry, didn't have that, but we still found a way to have the best record in the regular season. We still found a way to have players be stepping up all throughout the regular season. And yes, the coaching was probably more glaring, but again, within that, it's like the players also weren't playing with any kind of pride. They weren't playing like they wanted to prove a point, like they wanted to make some type of stand against getting gentlemen swept by the 8 seed. And I think that we got to look at this like, okay, we don't have this core together for about 4 years at this point, if not the 5, if we go all the way back to Toronto, and we got a chip. But there's a lot that goes into that chip that we got, not taking it away. But if we being realistic, it's probably time to move some things around. And that may not feel great, but there's time to take some risk. And I'm saying that because Giannis is Giannis. Like, this is not just your regular superstar. Giannis at any given time can want out. So while we all sitting back saying like, oh, we just give it time. If Giannis ever truly gets fed up, what are the Bucks going to be able to do? What are they truly going to be able to do?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But like, I think with all those years you brought up, even in that 2021 championship run, the defunct pod or defunct episode that never got dropped, calling for Bud's job even in that year. Even in that year that we win, no matter what. It's always been a string of like, oh, how the hell did we get outcoached by Spo in the 2020 bubble? We just had one of the most historic runs out of any team that year.
Well, Spo's a better coach.
Spo's better, 100%. The Brooklyn series. I mean, it takes PJ Tucker to verbally assault Coach Budenholzer to be like, let us switch. Let us switch. KD's cooking us. Stop the drop coverage. And then Bud sits there, he's like, okay. And then finally, some change happens. I do think in terms of like why that happens, that's a roster thing. That's PJ like vocally saying like, this isn't working. We need to do something different. But I think I'm not saying stay put for the foreseeable future, but I'd say that one coaching change and you give it to All-Star break next year, even though it's not even a regular season thing. But if guys aren't producing, if guys are still injured, if those things still stand true, that's when we could see like what a trade looks like. But I don't know, because it's already enough. Like you said, it's already enough dealing with like a coaching change for a franchise at this caliber. That's enough to deal with, to throw a player addition in there, depending on who it is. Like if it is that name, if it is the Dames, if it is I don't even know who is a Kyrie in there, I understand. I see, but I'm scared seeing how the two other teams that are competing for championships have done in Dallas, in Phoenix, where it's like, oh yeah, well, we gotta do something different. This obviously hasn't worked. And they've gone to worse situations. Like Dallas, I have no idea what they're going to do with those two. They're in fear of losing Luka because they have nobody around him that can win a game. In Phoenix, they say 36 is cool. 36 is we're all right. But are you? That's an aging KD for all of your young core that you had, because you thought that it was a shot to win now. And now you might not have any shot past KD retiring. And then you have D-Book all alone with CP3's jersey in the rafters and KD gone. So it's like, I see your point where it's like, we do have to make something shake. I completely feel you, because it's just like, at some point, just like trying to do the same thing over and over is crazy. But I feel like the good teams, the best teams, have that continuity, and like they've gone through those highs and lows and can bounce back on, that team chemistry that they've built over the years outside of just trying to trade for the biggest name out there. And then lo and behold, when it doesn't work, now you're actually SOL.
I would agree if the teams that you mentioned weren't the teams that you mentioned. Like
Okay,
Dallas,
Phoenix was in the finals. Dallas, let's maybe take them out of the conversation.
well, even
Phoenix had a
Phoenix
great
being in the
core.
finals, the Bucks don't have a Mikal Bridges and a Cam Johnson that would have to go for someone who's even aging, for that matter. You know what I'm saying? But what I'm more so saying is, I'm not saying like go big all in on a championship or bust situation. I'm saying what makes the most sense for Giannis? Who makes the most sense beside Giannis? Because what conversation are we having if they don't win in 21? If Harden doesn't get injured and Kyrie doesn't get injured and we lose to Brooklyn in the second round, that would have been a conference finals loss, a second round loss, a second round loss, a second round loss, and a first round loss.
Yep.
And so then what conversation will we be having about who should be beside Giannis playing? Because let's just assume that Giannis's production is the same. Yep. You know what I'm saying? Like we're gonna look at it has to be somebody else. Like he needs someone else. If they
I think the conversation is the same. I think it's exactly this, what we're having now, just probably even more clutching our process. It's like, oh, well, they're not 2 years older than what they are at this point.
If they didn't win in 21, a move would have happened already. I think. If they don't win in 21, someone would have been moved.
I think that coaching move happens. I don't know if a player.
Well, the coaching move happens for sure, but I definitely don't put Pat, because also if a coach comes in, because I don't think the front office is just looking at finding a coach. I would have to think that the front office is looking like, yeah, we're going to have to do something with this roster. Like something's going to have to happen. And again, I just keep going back to, I think sometimes as Bucks fans, we keep thinking like Giannis, and it's like, we can hope that Giannis has the Kobe mentality or the Timmy mentality in regards to, I'm going to stick it out through the rough years and stay. But let's be real. Giannis wants championships. He said it. Yeah. I'm not saying he doesn't want to win them for Milwaukee. I'm not saying he doesn't have love for Milwaukee, but we've seen this new age of players where if Milwaukee is no longer the best situation for him and he's already delivered a championship, what does he have? Like, he doesn't have anything left obligating him to be here. So that's why I say there's an urgency in what makes sense right now. There is a window where you have, arguably to most people, the best player in the league in the middle of his prime. Yes, you're bringing in a new coach, but you don't necessarily, you've already missed out on 2 trips back to the finals, right? The league's only getting younger and only getting better. So something has to, in my mind, something has to happen now, because next year, if we wait till next year, and if we're already saying next year is going to be an experiment to some degree, it's going to be a trial period. So now we're really looking at 24, 25. And that's in the second to last year of his contract, I believe. Yeah. And that's if there was real promise shown in the trial period. But that may not be what Giannis is looking for. Especially when he's looking around the league, like, there are guys that want it now. There are guys that I can probably go play with, and it may not be this let me team up deal, but there may be a better fit for me. There may be a fit where I may not do a KD and go join, the 7-9 team, but if I go to another situation that makes things a little bit easier for me, and not easy like he doesn't want the challenge, but just easier basketball. Yeah. He's gonna do what he has to do. And I think that if we are blind to that fact right now, really looking at the last 4 or 5 years as he's been in his prime, this trial period could be the start of the end, if you will, if that's the way you want to put it. But I don't know. We'll see. I do think the coaching is the big domino. I think the coach that you bring in will determine where players are, which players stay, what the mentality of the team will be in general. There's a lot of work though for them to stay. They'll be a good team, but for them to be contenders, a lot of work has to be done.